Well, let me start. Hello, colleagues. While we wait our friends and colleagues to log in into the platform, let me start saying that today we will talk, we will discuss about the participation of Southern researchers in development economics fora. And so basically we want to know how much voice do researchers living and working in the developing world have about their very own countries. And before starting, let me say that it is a pleasure for me to be moderating this panel of PEP colleagues, PEP researchers, and also to thank the Global Development Network for this opportunity. And and here I would like to emphasize the motto of GDN: local research for better lives, which I think is a quite appropriate motto for our presentation. So, Veronica, please let me start. Let me give you the mic. So we start talking about the participation of researchers in academic journals. Veronica, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Lucas, and thank you to all the participants in this panel. Well, what I wanted to share with you is some results that we obtained when we analyzed the publications in academic journals. What we did is we consider 20 development journals, 20 top development journals, and consider the publications between 1990 and 2019. So we have almost 30 years of publications, and we classified each article according to the location of the researcher. For example, the article could be written only by northern researchers, only by southern researchers, or by a team, a collaboration between researchers located in the north or in the south. And what we see there is that clearly almost more than 73% of the articles published in the period are written by northern researchers. So are only the authors are all located in northern institutions. This does not mean that their nationality is from one of those countries, but they are working. Their academic environment is located in a northern institution. And what we also see is that around less fewer than one sixth, around 16% are written by southern researchers, and the remaining, the rest is a collaboration between northern and southern researchers. So mainly, basically, what we have there in that publications, which are very, as you know, are very relevant for the academic discussion in development, is mainly written by northern researchers. But we also detected, when we look at the time trends in these figures that I presented them aggregately, but when you look at the time trend, you see that the collaborations between northern and southern researchers have been increasing, and we consider uh, that is good news, because we see an important and stable trend to more collaboration between researchers located in the north or in the south. And we argue that this may be a good way of giving more voice to southern researchers, and also helping to develop uh, the national research systems in the south. So that's part of our main results. Lucas, I don't know if you want to pass the.
Yes, that is extremely interesting, Veronica. We will come back to these recent trends in our questions and answer at the end probably. But Nisha, please, the mic is yours. Can you tell us your learnings about the participation of researchers in policy debates?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Lucas. So I would like to share with you some findings from a recent study done by PEP Research Fellows, where Lucas, you led that study, which was on assessing the participation of researchers located in low middle income countries in economic development policy debates. So we were four of us and representing Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and we collected responses from close to 100 researchers representing these different continents. What we found is that Southern researchers are excluded from policy debates taking place nationally as well as regionally and internationally. And this is due to a variety of reasons. First of all, Southern researchers have little opportunity for policy research, which also limits their participation in policy debates. And this again is due to a very different reasons. So, first of all, the local governments are not interested in research. A lot of the policy making done by the local governments are they have political incentives, and then they work on these policy documents using selected researchers. And also the research done by researchers, the research reports are too technical. So a lot of the policymakers don't make use of them much. And also because policies are done in a hurry just before elections or just before budget presentations, there is no room for discussions. And Southern researchers don't have opportunities to do policy research with bilateral, multilateral agencies also, because those agencies give a lot of emphasis on the quality, academic quality of the research. And they tend to work with researchers, internal researchers, and maybe using local researchers minimally or for doing basic activities like data collection. And also because of lack of public investment and access to data and other resources, also the local Southern researchers don't have opportunities to engage in policy research. Another reason why these policy debates don't take place is lack of platforms. So this was revealed by all these researchers that we got information from. There's poor networks between researchers and government, and also between the bilateral, multilateral agencies and researchers. And another reason is these policy research documents produced by development agencies. They actually don't position them for use. So they might have a dissemination workshop at the end of doing the research, but they stop there. So, to influence policy, you need to work in variety of different spaces, targeting different stakeholders. I mean, that process doesn't happen. So because of that also, there is lack of policy debates. Another reason pointed out by the researchers is that they really don't have incentives to participate in policy research, because the quality of the researcher's output is measured by the publications. So they don't get any reward for, maybe other than a personal reward for influencing policy, in engaging in policy debates. Lastly, the reason why they don't engage in policy debates is because of lack of capacity. A range of skills are needed to effectively communicate research using different media and different products, because the technical reports you usually write at the end of a research project do not do well in terms of influencing policy. So you need to be able to write those in simpler languages and maybe use social media to communicate the findings. And that doesn't happen, partly because there is lack of capacity, because researchers in the universities, they are actually taught to design research projects and compile research reports, but not really to influence policy. So these are the main reasons, Lucas. I'll stop here.
Thank you, Nisha. Ronelle, please, could you go ahead and tell us the learnings from the participation of researchers in development economics conferences? I think Ronelle might have a little bit of a problem with the mic, so we can go ahead with Ramos, and then we come back to you, Ronelle. Ramos, please tell us what you learn about the participation of Southern researchers on consulting.
Thank you, Lucas, and good afternoon, morning, evening, colleagues and participants. So under the Partnership for Economic Policy project that we did on participation in consulting by researchers and consultants living in southern countries, we learned that there's really a perception that an overwhelming majority of research is of research consultancy in economic development is not being done by institutions in the southern countries, but rather by institutions in northern countries. And these institutions in northern countries often take the lion's share of the work itself, and importantly, the leadership around what is then recommended from the consultancy, which can be a bit worrying. And we also found that intellectual leadership for the consulting is also driven from the northern institutions, even when they can partner with southern countries. So those three were the main areas around participation that are the consulting aspect of participation.
Thank you, Ramos. Thank you. Ronelle, it's good to see you now. Please go ahead. The mic is yours. You are muted, Ronelle. You are still muted. There is a picture of a mic. You have to click on that. It's in the middle, the down part of the screen at the middle. Well, let me move to the next while Ronelle is trying to solve these technical issues. Actually, I had a lot of trouble with this.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
it's
Sorry
working
about
now.
that. What we found with the conferences is analyzing the top 5 developers in development economics. We found that 6 out of the 10 who were presenting at development conferences were from developed country universities, and only 1 out of 10 were from developing country universities. So there was a vast overrepresentation of developed country universities at these top international conferences, and that was also associated hosted in developed countries. When it was hosted in developing countries, this disparity was substantially less severe. The remainings of 3 out of 10 presenters were from non-universities, but I think what's important to recognize here is for this group, less than 10% were affiliated with developing country institutions. So also in this group, it's mainly developed country presenters. And also to emphasize that this has not changed over time. There's very little signs this is improving. If anything, what has been shown is that the non-university segment has expanded over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronelle. Thank you, guys. So to somehow summarize our learning about the participation of researchers located in the South in these different fora, participation in journals, in conference, in policy debates, in consulting, it appears to provide an overall estimate. It appears that the voice of Southern researchers is only about 10-20% in the best of the cases. So it seems like that participation appears to be too little. I mean, it is hard, it is difficult to take a philosophical perspective to know what is enough, what is too little, but it seems like only 10-20% of journal publications, of presentation at conference, of writing chapters in international flagship reports on consulting, only 10%, 20%, that appears to be too little. So let's move now. Anna, the mic is yours. Let's talk a little bit more about the obstacles that researchers located in the South, the obstacles they face.
Thank you, Lucas. Yes, we try to do a bibliography review to understand the main obstacles that researchers located in developing countries face to publish scientific articles in top economic journals. And that includes networking, participation in conferences, access to technology, funding, lack of research skills, language, environment, and visibility. So let me talk a little bit about each of these topics. Networking, the development of a network among the scholars is just crucial to stimulate the cutting edge of scientific debate and to improve the number and level of the publications. Therefore, lack of communication, of connections to key members of this scientific community is a very important obstacle in publishing in top journals. Also, participation of scholars in scientific conferences, Ronelle just mentioned, is essential to build capacity and increase knowledge and connections. In the conference, scholars have the opportunity to present their research findings, discuss the issues with other scientists working in similar fields, and that will improve the quality of the study, helping the process of the publication in journals. Unfortunately, the acceptance of conference papers from many scholars in developing countries is an issue. And when their papers are accepted, they may not be able to attend the conferences due to lack of resources to pay travel costs, accommodations, and registrations that are required. What about technology? Although digital innovation is a global phenomenon, there exist enormous inequalities between countries with respect to diffusion, performance, and accessibility of digital services. Scholars who are highly qualified and capable of making contributions to knowledge production are sometimes excluded because of technology deprivation. Funding is considered the most important obstacle that scientific institutions face in underdeveloped and developing countries. And this is important to finance research and technology. Economic funding is essential to provide infrastructure, technological equipment, computers, data, books, journal subscriptions, and all that would help obtaining new developments of research and increase publications. In developing countries, universities and research centers have poor infrastructure, and scientists are not well paid. The consequence is that in many institutions in the global south, there is shortage of qualified scholars, as most scientists have not had the opportunity to study in top universities abroad, and therefore have not had contact with the cutting edge knowledge. Human capital formation is extremely important for the development of research and technology. Another problem is language. It's well known that to reach a larger international community and influence the world of science, researchers need to write their studies in English. The likelihood of papers being rejected for publication increased due to the fact that non-native English speakers face more difficulties in writing scientific papers, in incurring to linguistic error, and in deviating from research style. Another problem is environment. An environment where it's possible to exchange ideas, have free flow of information, and do not have censorship is ideal for knowledge production and scholarly publishing. However, in many countries, political instability and economic crisis create environmental challenges for scholars that constrain the production of research. Scientists may be fired, arrested, or denied of promotion if publishing anything critical or against current government policies, and that results in publications being censored and discouraged. Finally, visibility. Most of the international organizations are based in developed countries. Due to that, researchers in the South lack visibility. Distance between organizations and local partners, lack of knowledge on local issues, and low interactions result in less efficient research outputs. Local researchers should be more involved into the proposed work since they have crucial knowledge of the political environment and specificities of the country that would contribute to the success of the project. This lack of visibility and network among scientists in the South reduce efficiency implementing projects to help exactly solving the social, economic, and political issues in poor countries, and therefore reduce research and publications. That's all. Thank you so much, Lucas.
No, thank you, Anna. Let me add some joint work we have been doing with Anna, where we somehow distinguish obstacles that are on the supply side, some difficulties that researchers in the developing world have, but also obstacles from the demand side. Do the editors of journals which are located in northern universities, do they demand local knowledge, or they somehow believe that the one size fits all theory works? So the knowledge that I learn in one country easily extrapolates to learning from other countries. And so we tend to believe that there is a lack of demand for local knowledge, in part because of the influence of modernization theory of the one size fits all. But let's move now. Let me move now to our next slide. So why should we care? And Veronica, please let me give you the mic back again to you.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Well, as we have been discussing, we are like trying to include several areas or several arenas where the work of researchers in the South can be shown. But as in terms of the journals, why should we care? Why it may be important for Southern researchers to have more voice in this in the academic publications? First of all, because it's an area of engagement with international community, so it's somehow it may also imply the construction of networks, which Ana Lucia was talking some minutes ago. It's a place where the problems the specific problems of our regions or our countries may be shown to the world, so it may have discussing the problems or the development problems of our regions in in those journals may have help us to find better solutions, to find better collective solutions. It may also increase the impact of our research. As I said first, it may also help us to build more strong research systems. And of course, it may also guide the investment in specific policies. What the fact that researchers located in the South may have as it was discussed, much more knowledge about the context where they are working. It may imply benefits in terms of the publication. So a more prominent presence of Southern-based researchers in the international scientific community may imply benefits in terms of higher connections between with the social and economic situation that is being analyzed, higher knowledge of the institutional conditions, and also better policy recommendations. And it may, of course, also help to bring more diversity into the academic community. This may also be an important aspect to keep in mind. So given all these reasons, it's something that we the specific participation in
I think we lost both Lucas and Veronica.
Sorry?
So maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Veronica, please go ahead.
Because I heard something that someone had problems to hearing, or maybe it was just me who received the message. Okay, now it was that. I mean, I was just like closing these comments about the importance of publications, of having more representation in the academic world, and a way of looking at it is looking at journals.
Very, very clear, Veronica. We should definitely care. Absolutely. Ronelle, the mic is yours, please.
Thank you. With conferences, there are similar concerns, but it does manifest in a different way. Firstly, one should mention the disadvantage that accrues to individual researchers through the difficulty in attending and participating in development dialogues at these top conferences. It's not only being able to get your ideas out there, but it's also, and the career advantage that brings, but it's also an impediment to not get expert feedback, to not get access to the market, and be able to promote your skills and your work. I think there's also a lot of tacit learning and social learning that goes on at conferences that benefit early career researchers and actually all researchers about what's happening at the cutting edge, what are the early trends, which are the new ideas, which are the discredited ideas. So I think not having access to conferences do matter a lot. They also matter for development policy. And I think that is where we are placing most of the focus and the argument that this needs to be corrected and we need to pay attention to this. And it matters for development policy in two ways. The first one is more of a pragmatic argument in that it having a development voice present in these spaces, in these conferences, is actually right social context and political context, which is crucial for development, for the development agenda and for development policy making. And then also, I think there's also just a ethics or social justice issue, and that is that we are discussing the development of specific countries, of specific regions. That it is just right to have them at the table. It is not right that they are only 10% of the participants at these conferences, at these conversations. So there's also a matter of principle And then there's a matter of pragmatism of, what is the way we would want to develop policy and what would be good people to include. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you, Ronelle. Ramos, some inspiring ideas from the consulting group. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Lucas. We have got roughly 4.
Okay, I think we lost Ramos as well.
Can you hear me?
He was supposed to speak next.
We can hear Nisha. I think that you are having some trouble, but the rest of the people is hearing to Ramos. No worries.
Okay. All right. We've got four reasons why we should care, and they essentially run along the lines that Anna and Ronelle have been discussing.
Do you want to talk about what can be done in terms of journals until we wait for the other?
Hi, Nisha. I don't know if you can hear me, but we can all hear to what Ramos is saying. Perhaps your computer is not working well. So let's go ahead with Ramos. Ramos, continue, please.
All right. Yes. So the first reason why we should care is a rather obvious one, in that economic development consulting plays quite a significant role in economic development of developing countries. So a lot of the governments in these countries and non-governmental organizations rely quite a lot on consultants for their interventions. So that's the first set of reasons. Then the second one speaks to these ideas that Anna and Ronelle have been talking around, in that it provides a means for inclusion, and broadening participation, which ultimately can result in creating some equitable development policy and strategy environment in these particular countries. And the third reason, quite linked to that, is of course the importance of what we call local knowledge externalities, in that there is some externality that you get in terms of improving business consulting performance, the quality of the policy or intervention that is made by incorporating local knowledge. I think Ronelle approached it from a social justice point of view, but here, even in terms of basic effectiveness in terms of shaping performance of the consultants itself and performance of policy and interventions, there are also good reasons why we should care. And the final one is that we pick up that there are significant entry costs into consulting that are disproportionately affecting those located in southern countries compared to those in the northern countries. So we should care in terms of dealing with those high entry barriers that those located in southern countries tend to face. Yeah, thank you, Lucas.
Thank you, Ramos. Thank you, very interesting. So now we move to the last and probably the most interesting question. Well, what can be done? So let me give Andy the mic. Andy, the mic is yours, please.
Okay, let me perhaps start. Thank you very much, Lucas. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I'm speaking here not as a Southern researcher. I'm speaking here not as a PEP person. I'm speaking here as an editor of a development journal, Review of Development Economics. And as part of this PEP project, we did an analysis of submissions to the journal and looked at it by country, by origin of the country, and looked at the fate. And I'd like to just say a little bit about that first of all, before I talk about some of the issues, if I may, Lucas. So as a development journal, we want to hear the voice of people that are based in developing countries. We get a lot of submissions from high-income countries. Now, a lot of those submissions from high-income countries are actually researchers who originate from developing countries but are doing their PhDs or have got research jobs in high-income countries. So it's a bit of a difficult comparison to make. But anyway, we looked at it based on the country in which people were based. Now, the first point is there are quite a lot of papers published from people from low and middle income countries. If you look at the papers published in our journal, 46% of them only are from high income country based researchers. Now that's much more than the population, but 54% come from low or middle income countries. A lot of that comes from upper middle income countries. A lot of that comes from China, but that's important. We also looked at the fate of different submissions. A lot of papers get desk rejected. We looked at desk rejection rates for researchers from low and middle income countries compared to high income countries, and the desk rejection rates are much higher, like 60% or more from those from low and middle income countries compared to 38% or something in high income countries. Even when they get to review, the acceptance of those from high income countries is greater than it is from those from low and middle income countries. So there's no doubt that those from poorer countries, those from low and middle income countries lose out at every step of the way, getting their paper reviewed, getting their paper through review, getting their paper published. There's a number of reasons for this. There's a lot of reasons for the high desk rejection, and a lot of them are things that actually should be quite easily dealt with. Plagiarism is one. Poor quality of writing. Now, I don't mean the English there. I mean poor quality of explaining in the introduction what the paper is about, motivating the paper well. These things are problems. A fixation about using text rather than looking at interesting questions, very specific and limited papers which really don't appeal to international journals. Writing papers which have a chance of being considered in an international journal, I think, is really important. And this, I think, goes back to some of the issues that Anna and others have been talking about people having guidance, especially those who have not had the luck, have not had the opportunity to do a PhD in a high-income country, but how to prepare a paper, how to prepare an appropriate paper for submission to a journal, what sort of guidance they receive, what sort of support they receive. And I think that's an important challenge. But I think there's also other questions for, other questions for the journal itself. We should be having we should be having more co-editors based from those in low and lower middle income countries. That's a challenge, that's a difficult thing, but it's important, it's necessary. A lot of the co-editors may have originated from lower middle income countries, but are now based in high income countries. So other important issues, I think, are some journals charge submission fees. Ours doesn't, but that's potentially a barrier. That's potentially an issue or a difficulty. Giving people guidance about what's needed to prepare papers for publication. PEP does give guidance about people about how to write papers for publication. As journals, we probably should also be giving people advice on the sort of mistakes to avoid making. Plagiarism is something that's very easily checked, and it's not a mistake that people should be making. Thinking about your audience, thinking about you have a wide enough audience and great enough appeal of the paper. These are things which I think are easily said and easily explained to people, and would hopefully lead to lower desk rejection rates for people coming from low and middle income countries. Let me stop there for now, Lucas, but people may want to follow up.
We will definitely like to follow up, Andy, and thank you very much for being here. So Ramos and then Nisha, what do you have to say about what can be done to improve the situation? Please, Ramos, go ahead, and then we have Nisha to finish.
Thank you, Lucas. To be to the point, we have three types of interventions that we are thinking. None of them are novel, but we think if they are done, they can go some way in assisting with almost democratizing this consultancy space. And the first is a pretty straightforward and brutal intervention, which is more direct, where commissioning agencies can earmark some financial allocations in a call for consultancy work for Southern-based researchers. And in particular, profit and not-for-profit institutions can be encouraged to participate in those calls by nudging them through this protected allocation from the commissioning agency. So the first is really protecting a portion of the consultancy work for those located in southern countries. The second is really removing some barriers that are inadvertently preventing as wide participation from Southerners. And these come in many ways, but the most important is around procurement systems that inadvertently have these barriers. So for example, one example that we use is that if you are not from a country which is a signatory country to the consultancy issuing organization, then you can't bid for a procurement. And most developing countries aren't signatories to that organization, and most of the countries that are signatories are from OECD, for example. So already you have excluded a large part of Southern consultants and consulting firms by putting in that clause in the procurement system. And the third one is exactly what we are doing now. And we think that networks such as GDN, Southern Voice, PEP could jointly and aggressively do advocacy work, agitating around these particular issues like we're now doing. And we think that can eventually start at least influencing the processes and systems around consulting procurement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramos. Nisha, it is your turn. I just also write that on the chat. I hope you see the chat. Perhaps you don't hear me.
Yeah, I think she's having a problem with her Mac.
Hello,
Yeah.
sorry, I was some technical problems. I'm done. So, as I mentioned earlier, has spent multiple obstacles in effective policy delays. Solutions to overcome these obstacles must also be influenced and developed in different places. So
Nisha, your audio is not working well. It's very...
Yeah, I took one. Excuse me for my authority, but I mute you, Nisha, because the audio is not working well. So allow me. I will try. I learned from talking with Nisha, so I will try to repeat the work we did together. And when it comes to policy debates, one of the things that can be done is the following. Policy debates are to some extent shaped by international flagship reports. And international flagship reports written by the World Bank, the IMF, UNDP, they are quite influential and they give very little voice to researchers located in the South, particularly the World Bank and the IMF. So one thing that can easily be done is to simply include more researchers living in the developing world to be significant contributors, to write authors, to be authors, to write chapters, to participate in those international flagship reports. And that's because, again, the international flagship reports are about the development of countries in the South. So people who live and do research in those countries, they should have some voice, not only for some moral issues, as Ronelle and Ramos mentioned a time ago, but also because because it's the most efficient way to go. If we do not recognize that local knowledge, if we still believe in that the one-size-fits-all theory is the right thing to go, we will be in trouble. And let me provide a very, very simple example, and here we finish and we move to the questions and answer section. So, for example, one usual methodology that researchers who live in the North tend to have, they tend to assume that laws are enforced. So when you see any study trying to analyze the impact of laws and regulations on economic outcomes, usually the methodology is to ignore enforcement, because in the developed world, laws are usually enforced, they tend to ignore that part. However, when you translate that methodology, which makes sense for the North, to analyze something that is going on in the South, where laws are usually ignored, where there is little compliance with the law, you end up having big trouble. I am a labor economist, and basically the literature trying to estimate the causal effects of labor laws and regulation, labor market outcomes in the developing world, assuming that laws are enforced, is basically quite misleading. So that's just one simple example where people in the North need to listen to what people in the South have to say, because the assumptions of your models, the assumptions of your methodologies sometimes do not fit into the realities of our own countries. So I don't know if Nisha, if your mic is working well. Otherwise, let's open. We have 10, 15 minutes for questions and answers. Please go ahead. And by the way, I want to thank Ana, Andy, Veronica, Ramos, and Ronelle. Thank you for your participation. while we wait, if people have some questions and answers, I don't know, Andy, if you wanna give some reaction, since you are the only one from the north, just alone by yourself, if you want to say something about this. And thank you again for being here.
Hello, Lucas.
Yes, Nisha, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. I had some technical issues. So just to say that I think we need to tackle this issue of Southern researchers facing multiple obstacles in a lot of different ways. So first, I think they should be given more avenues to engage in policy research, and that needs to be done by interventions by the government and more investments in researchers, and also by development partners and policymakers. I think there needs to be more transparency when researchers are chosen for different policy research, and so that for them to engage. And more importantly, I think there needs to be emphasis given for effective communication of policy research. So we are in a very unsatisfactory situation where development policies are formulated paying little attention to scientific evidence, and scientific research play a limited role in influencing policy. So how we can change this is by having maybe the development agency should have guiding principles which give emphasis to positioning research for use. This will also highlight the need for involving local researchers, as Anna pointed out earlier, because you need proper understanding of the policy environment and different ways the policy to influence policy change. And more research projects should also be done to understand the political economy of policy making, because unless you understand that, I think you can't influence policies. So thirdly, I think the value of policy influence should be given more prominence, because even actually when you assess a research project, the policy influencing part is not given too much prominence. And donor agencies also give more prominence to academic rigor rather than influencing policy. So a lot of the times you find that development research ends with a dissemination workshop, and those are, I mean, good research is not used to policies. And also I think policy makers should be made to give proper credit also. They refer to the local researchers, but given proper credit. So that was incentives just to participate in policy debates using different media. And lastly, I think researchers themselves should be given incentives for engaging in policy research. I mean, our earlier mentioned study, we found that a lot of there is lack of incentives among the Southern researchers to participate in policy because there are no incentives for that. And fourthly, I think there should be a research and policy. So there should be more networking between governments and policymakers and development agencies and researchers. So there are more opportunities for policy debates and discussion before they are made. And lastly, I think local capacity to research and create policy should be, there should be investments in that, because a lot of the local researchers, they don't know, because writing a research report and communicating that effectively is two very different things. And also now there is so that can be leveraged to engage in policy debates. So there needs to be more emphasis given for training for that, because universities also don't prepare researchers for policy communication. They also prepare researchers mainly to design research projects and to write reports, not so much for communicating that research. So that needs to be developed. And I want to end with this last thing. This COVID-19 highlighted the importance of having capable local researchers to enable countries to react to policy issues in time, because unless there was researchers who engage in policy debates and highlighted the issues, I think effective policies were not done because everybody was big countries and you couldn't depend on foreign researchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Nisha. Andy, I don't know if you want to pick up the mic.
Let me just make a couple of points. I mean, Arianda Han said something in the chat that this is not just about economics, and I completely agree about that. It's true in all the disciplines, these issues, I think, about underrepresentation of Southern researchers. I think there's no question about that. I think Lucas's point about the dominance of the World Bank and the IMF and the way of operating is also very important. But I think another thing we need to think about is the sort of methodological dominance of particular approaches, which are often very much favored towards richer countries. So a focus on for publication, rigorous demonstration of causality, randomized controlled trials, and so on. Often that, and therefore that for publication. Often that is more difficult for Southern researchers as well. And we need to value other types of research as well. I'm not saying that there's not a role for those things, there certainly is, but to value other types of policy relevant, even descriptive, simpler research, and not just feel that we always have to demonstrate causality. Another point in the chat about partnerships between Northern and Southern researchers, and I think that's potentially very important, but of course that needs to be a balanced and a fair partnership. So many of these have been quite unbalanced and quite extractive, where the Northern researchers are the ones with the funding and so on. I think the last thing I would say, in the environment of aid cuts, I think there's a risk it's going to get worse, that the support for Southern researchers from a dwindling aid budget from the North may reduce. Let me stop there.
Thank you very much, Andy. Ana, Veronica, Ramos, Ronelle, would you like to add anything? We have 2 more minutes.
Lucas probably try to say something that was not discussed so far. For example, create some ways of exchange programs to help scholars, networks of libraries to purchase journals and books jointly, something that is not done much in developing countries. Involve private sectors in financing research and technology, training and supporting future generations, involving graduate students to help in teaching loads, because we have a lot of administrative tasks and teaching that sometimes do not allow us to do research as much as developed countries do. And writing courses for language to help, and always involve more local researchers in doing researching, mainly from developed countries, but involving the questions and trying to solve problems about developing countries that many times they are not included. So, and now with COVID, it's clear that the rich countries are dominating everything, vaccines, the research, and the funds, and many countries, they don't even have the vaccines to start or to give to a large percentage of the population. So that's a main problem. And that's life, not only research. So thank you.
Absolutely, very interesting. And Ana, Veronica, Ramos, Ronelle. Well, let me add something. First of all, the fact that we are having this opportunity to talk about these issues. It provides hope to me. Having said that, I think there is a tradition who tends to believe that the quality of the research, the quality of the consulting, the quality of conference presentations by people living in developing countries is of lower standards, lower quality compared to that produced in the north. And of course, in some cases, that is true. There are cases where we do research of lower quality. But there are other cases where we do research understanding problems that people located in the north are not able to understand, because our children go to schools in the developing world. Our wives work in the developing world. We vote for politicians in the developing world. We consume the environment in the developing world. So we have first-hand knowledge of what's going on here. And that's something that in many cases, the one-size-fits-all theory does not tend to appreciate. But I think I am talking too much. I will leave the final word, either Veronica, Ramos, Ronelle, please go ahead.
Yes, Lucas, from my side, maybe if I can go first in follow-up to the point that you're making. In our survey, when we probed around entry costs, the reasons that were given are quite interesting by those who responded. 14% of them say it's quality issues, and 23% of respondents say something to do with timelines in terms of delivering. But then they actually made a rather interesting point after that, that those problems aren't peculiar to southern-based consultants and researchers, because they equally apply to northern researchers. So that's just a dimension that I wanted to add in, that although quality issues are raised by respondents, but they also say it's not unique to southern countries, so it does not fully explain the lower participation that we are seeing from the consulting business. Thank you.
So if we have just 1 minute, because I see in the chat very interesting comments about maybe the origin of the problem, or something that is like more conceptual, that maybe that the solutions that we are thinking about, like practical things that may help to change this situation. But there are very interesting comments about the what we consider the quality of research, or what we consider the utility of research. So that is like another, I think it's something like more abstract, and also it's very, very important to keep that in mind, because we are like sometimes playing within the definition, the rules that we have defined, or that someone has defined, and we are trying to find practical solutions. But also we should keep in mind, I think, like this global perspective of what is research for, and maybe what we are doing, like just not to end up trying to enter only like critically into how it's defined now. Just wanted to bring those comments, which are very interesting, in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. Totally right. The comment by thank you, Edgar Rodriguez. Edgar emphasizing how donors are financing the intervention suggested by Anna. Pierre Jacquet emphasizing the issue of quality. and Arjan Dehan, who, by the way, many of the presentation here got insightful comments from him. So thank you very much for all. Ronelle, do you have a final word? Anna? No. So thanks a lot for this insightful conversation, and let's continue doing our effort to try to increase the voice of people working in the South, because that is a local, using GDM's motto again, local research for better lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Lucas, for sharing this so well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucas.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.